So I'm going to go through the solution components. Thanks. So the way we have kind of constructed the session is that I'll give you an overview of the solution, all the different parts of the solution, so you have a good understanding of the architecture, all the pieces that fit into the solution, and then we go into specific demos, demonstrating specific capabilities within the solution framework. So I'll start with the typical branch. When you look at a typical branch, you'll have an access point, a switch, a Aruba gateway. Now, what we're doing with the Aruba gateway is we are repurposing or leveraging a mobility controller hardware platform. So we have the 7000 series and the 7200 series mobility controller platforms, but we are not using it for mobility services. But what we are doing is we have augmented SD-WAN to Aruba OS, which is running within the branch gateways or the gateways. And so we are leveraging SD-WAN, LAN, security services within the gateway. So the gateway will connect to the WAN circuits, as when you're connecting, as the question was. It will do zero-touch provisioning. So each gateway has a TPM chip, a trusted platform module, where it burns in the factory cert. So it does secure ZTP to Aruba Central. So Aruba Central is Aruba's cloud management platform. And this full network and all the components within this network, the head-end gateways, the branch gateways, the access points, the switches, the virtual gateways, all of it is managed by Aruba Central. So once the gateway authenticates with Aruba Central, it creates a TLS or an SSL WebSocket session with Aruba Central and downloads all the configuration. So it gets provisioned from Aruba Central. So as part of the configuration, we configure the LAN, the WAN services, routing services, DHCP, firewall, all the stuff that you need to configure gets pushed down. But we also have SD-WAN orchestration running on Aruba Central. So the SD-WAN orchestrator discovers all the WAN circuits. It discovers, is it an MPLS circuit, is it an internet circuit, is it a cellular circuit, what the private and public IP addresses are. And based on how the customer wants to craft their topology, the overlay topology, so they describe the intent in Aruba Central, and that intent gets translated to the VPN tunnels that the orchestrator builds. Right? So there's no configuration in terms of there's no IKE-based configurations to set these tunnels up. The orchestrator sets up all the tunnels, connecting all the branches to all the hub sites or even between branches across the network. Once you have the VPN overlay, then it's a question of learning routes. All the endpoints advertise their routes to the SD-WAN orchestrator, right? And the SD-WAN orchestrator, there is an overlay routing protocol which we are running. And the orchestrator learns all the routes and reflects it back into the network based on the routing policy that you have configured centrally on Aruba Central, right? Now, all of these concepts, are pretty familiar to most of you because, in terms of SD-WAN and how centralized routing and VPN setup happens and how that simplifies life. The challenge for us and what we have done from the start is to make it and to build it with cloud-native technologies. So the SD-WAN orchestrator that we're running is completely based on microservice architecture. It's horizontally scalable. And to the scale that Kishore was referring to in terms of 14,000 devices, 14,000 sites, it's in the order of a few 100,000 tunnels just for a single tenant that the SD-WAN orchestration manages. Now, if you multiply this across multiple tenants, or hundreds and thousands of tenants, you can understand how the SD-WAN orchestrator scales. So that is absolutely essential for us, that it has to be ground-up built with cloud-native technologies. So once you have reachability across your network, so you have the overlay network, you have reachability across your network, the gateway starts to automatically probe on all the WAN circuits. So you can have overlay probes, which hit all the hub sites. And you don't have to configure this. As soon as the gateway connects, it starts to probe. It starts to do active probing. It's like your IP SLA probes. But in a number of cases, you also want to understand what the performance of your underlay or internet is. And if you look at most SD-WAN implementations, they will say hit Google DNS 8888. So we started along that line. And what we found is that Google starts to rate limit if you start to hit it pretty hard. So we have our own probe responder that we have in every region across the world. So as soon as the Aruba gateway comes up, connects to the internet, it starts to probe our probe responder to understand what the performance of the internet circuit looks like. So using the overlay and the underlay probes, now we understand what the health of the WAN circuits are. You can set up your dynamic path steering policies. You understand which application, where it's destined, and what sort of SLA the application needs, and you can set up a dynamic path selection policy to steer it in the right paths. Right? The gateway has a stateful firewall, which is built in, a layer 4 to layer 7 firewall. We have a DPI engine, which sees over 3,000 applications. And if a customer wants to split tunnel traffic, let's say to SaaS destinations, then they can set up a policy to say, hey, I want to split tunnel my O365 traffic or my Zoom traffic directly. URL filtering, geo IP reputation filtering are all built into the policy. And you don't need an advanced security license or any of that. It's all built into the same foundation layer. On the head-end side, if you have physical data centers, like many customers do on their colos, they will put physical gateways. They'll have physical VPN concentrators, effectively terminating all the tunnels and participating in the routing. If they have virtual data centers or VPCs or VNets, then they would deploy Aruba virtual gateways. The Aruba virtual gateways are completely orchestrated from Aruba Central. So it's not a question of just getting it from Marketplace and configuring all the pieces in all the subnets and joining the SD-WAN fabric. They don't have to do any of that. Aruba Central will deploy the virtual gateways, spin it up, configure all the subnets on the VPC side, as well as join the SD-WAN fabric. And finally, if there are customers who use cloud proxies or security, like Zscaler, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Symantec, we have integration with all of them, right? Really, we leave it up to the security team's decision. If they believe that they have Panorama, they're using, and if they want us to connect to Prisma, we connect to Prisma. We don't have an issue. If they're using Zscaler, we connect to Zscaler. And you will see a demonstration of that as well. And finally, for SaaS destinations, we also, one of the questions which constantly comes as we're rolling this out is what is my Skype or Teams performance across my sites? Right? That tends to be very high in most IT professionals' mind. So we automatically probe all the SaaS front doors, especially for these services. We have an integration of Microsoft and Office 365 team as well. And to understand what the performance is of all the SaaS destination or SaaS services, and we can steer the SaaS traffic onto the best path. And you will see a demonstration as that as well in this session. Now, the last part which I've left out is on the LAN side. And there's magic there as well. And that's really the whole SD-LAN part of the solution. So we covered all the SD-WAN concepts and all the SD-WAN capabilities at the highest level. And we'll get into deeper later. But there's a lot of magic which happens on the LAN side as well. As we're building an overlay on the WAN, we are also building an overlay on the LAN, right? If most of you are familiar with the mobility concepts, understand that mobile networks have always built overlays to controllers or whatever it may be. But effectively, we're doing the same. We're treating even the switch like a wired AP and building tunnels to the gateway. And fundamentally, what's happening is that every single device that is joining the network is effectively segmented as seeing it as a segment of one. So if a camera sees it as a segment of one, a user sees a segment of one. You're extending the firewall all the way to the endpoint. And then you set up role-based policies, both for access privileges, in terms of who can talk to who in the network, but also use that information to set up WAN policies, QoS policies, steering policies, path steering policies. So effectively, you're using a very native language type construct to set all your policies. Now, in the first time we presented to some of the analysts, they said this is too good to be true. We have actually rolled this out, the same technology, the full SD-Branch, for one customer across 6,000 sites. It's deployed, it's working, and they see the benefits of it. So it's not something that's just on paper. It's highly scalable, it works, and it's rolled out and deployed. Question?
So how did you do that? Because I know this has been a discussion at Inspire and Atmosphere and everything for a while. Especially from like a wireless standpoint. The controller is either the branch controller or the AP controller. It doesn't have the smarts and the capacity to do both. So how can you deploy that many without all of the other stuff? Or
Right.
are you doing instant going back to central for everything?
Correct, correct. So hold on to that question.
All right.
No, reason is I'm running out of time.
Oh,
It's a very valid question. So, and I'll park the question to Samuel and team. And Samuel and Mani will cover this. When they cover dynamic segmentation, how the architecture looks. So the question is, hey, we have an Aruba campus APs and instant APs. These are using instant APs.
Okay.
So the wireless policy is distributed.
Right.
But then if you're not tunneling it, how are you ensuring that all the traffic, even first of all, how is the gateway learning
Right.
all this information, and how is it doing the segmentation policy? So they will cover it in their demo.
All right.
So hold on to that.
I think just conceptually, just wanted to make sure you understood what Ramanan said. There are two overlays here. There's a WAN overlay where the endpoints of the tunnels are branches or branch gateways. And there's a LAN overlay where the endpoints are clients, right? Whether they be wired access switch ports, whether they be APs. So the gateway is really taking a LAN overlay and a WAN overlay and routing traffic across that and mediating traffic, mediating for access control as well.
Okay. I know there's a lot to take in this picture, but as we go through the sessions, a lot of it will become clear. I am a bit short of time, so I'm going to walk through these slides pretty fast. But at least I want you to understand the basic conceptual elements and grasp that, so it makes it much clearer. The demos the demos would kind of demonstrate all these things. So Aruba Central is Aruba's cloud management platform. For a user, it looks like just joining a cloud portal. They have their own login and sign on. And once they log into their portal, then they can see all the access points, Aruba switches, the gateways that they're managing in the network. So those are the base network components. On top of that, you have services that they have. They can have guest services, presence analytics services, SD-WAN is also a service, right? So it's like an application running on Aruba Central, so they can configure the SD-WAN policies, the overlay policies, the routing policies in one place there.
Is this actually hosted somewhere, or is this something you deploy? And if it's something you deploy, what's the scaling?
Correct. Good question. So that segues into the next slide. So if you look under the hood, what exactly is Aruba Central? Effectively, that's what you're asking. So Aruba Central is what we have built is a cloud platform. So it has an IaaS layer. So it's got the OS and container services. On top of that, we have a PaaS layer in terms of some of the messaging, database, load balancing, all those services. And then on top of that, you have app, that is the platform services in terms of IAM, identity access management, API gateway, all those things that all the other microservices require. So we built this whole PaaS layer. And the goal for building it is that Aruba Central is right now running on all the cloud service platforms. Basically, it's running on Google Cloud, Azure, AWS. It's running on all the platforms today. So all the major cloud platforms Aruba Central is being hosted on and is being run today. So we have over 20-odd clusters today running. Like Kishore was saying, a single tenant, the highest scale for a single tenant is they're managing 100,000 devices. At any given time, 1 million sessions they can actually monitor and see. That's just a single tenant. Now, Aruba Central today manages over tens of thousands of tenants. So you can understand the scalability of the solution. That kind of gives you a dimension of it, right?
Yeah, do you have any plans to put that, do you have any plans to let customers do private hosting, private cloud hosting, or anything of that? Because we've got, high secure DoD environments, things like that, where
Correct.
Maybe a cloud controller that you're hosting is not something they're going to bite on.
Yeah.
It's something we can consider because the platform has been built to be cloud provider independent. Today, what we offer are dedicated VPCs or VNets for customers who want their own playground. But for the most part, it's deployed in public cloud today. So we have a global footprint. I think the largest customer we have is in 35 countries today, and we have one coming up who's going to be in 90 countries. So we really do need a global footprint to provide services of this scale.
Yeah. So I think the key is that it's very scalable, built with microservices, horizontally scalable architecture, and including the SD-WAN orchestration, SD-WAN systems, all the systems that you'll see in the demo are built on this platform. I think that's the key takeaway that you want to understand. In terms of the gateway itself, I talked about the fact that we are leveraging the mobility controllers. So we have the 7000 series and the 7200 series. And when you look at the capacity and the performance of the gateway, you see the white little gateway there just below the access point. That's a 7005. And the 7005 does 2 gigs of firewall throughput and 1.2 gigs of encrypted throughput. Now, the question is, hey, if you look at a traditional router, that's like 10x the performance, right? And the advantage of that is obviously, if like the internet speeds double or triple, you don't have to go replace the gateway. But there's a reason beyond just the WAN capacity why we have such a lot of capacity in the gateway. And the fact is that we are also doing the whole dynamic segmentation. So even east-west traffic in the branch or at a campus is going through the gateway. So that's the reason for that added capacity, right? We can configure up to 5 WAN ports. It can be MPLS, Metro Ethernet, Internet, Cellular. It can be any of those. It's actually, there's no hardware construct. There's no hardware limitation. Any port can be configured as a WAN port for us. It's just that we have kind of, for now, most of the use cases fall under 5 satisfies 95% of our customers. If we need to expand it further, we will do that. Now, not all branches are of the same size. So when customers have small, medium branches, they can have a single gateway deployment at a branch site. For a slightly larger sites, they'll have a dual gateway deployment for resiliency. But you could also have micro branches. Those really small offices where you have like 10 people or 15, 20 people. So what we have done is we have the IAP itself, the AP. So we have made the AP itself like a mini gateway platform. So the AP acts as a wireless device, also as a mini gateway. So it's running SD-WAN Lite type capabilities. So it has WAN ports that you can connect, 2 WAN ports, and it automatically discovers that, sets up the tunnel, does some of the SD-WAN functions, not all of it, because it doesn't have the horsepower of a gateway, but sufficiently important functions that are required for such a small site. Right?
So I've got a question around that deployment. How do you handle in a global deployment? Specifically, you've got the mobile workers. So if your head-end gateway is out here in Silicon Valley and you're traveling in Europe, do you have the option to build local gateways? Is that cloud-based? Or how do you handle hairpinning that traffic? Because for mobile workers in a global workforce, that's a huge challenge and it hampers productivity. How do you solve that?
You're saying for the remote VPN client, right?
Right. I don't want to have to go. I would rather go somewhere in Europe to terminate to
Correct.
SDN.
So today, it doesn't automatically detect it. So they have to select, like in a normal VPN client, where they want to terminate on. Is it Frankfurt? Is it Santa Clara, wherever? They select based on the location they have, and then it goes and terminates on that appropriate location.
Gotcha. And is that something that you can deploy in the cloud if you don't want to choose to deploy physically? So that if you don't have an enormous amount of resources in that region, you can put that out there? Okay.
That's exactly right. So like I said, I am running short of time. So some of this will be covered in a later session. So I'm going to skip some of these slides. But what we've done is, even taking ZTP, we have enhanced ZTP and the overall experience of ZTP, and you'll see a demo session of that. We've actually created a mobile installer app for installation and to just automate the whole zero-touch provisioning system. Finally, in terms of how we configure on Central, we have a hierarchical configuration model. So you can group a whole set of devices or sites, and you can configure it at a group level, and all the devices that are parked within that group, where the configuration gets pushed down to them automatically. You can always override it at a device level, but you have the option to do all of it at a group level. So when you construct these policies that we're talking about, which eliminate the need to do it via matching IP or matching VLANs and do it via roles, you can pretty much promote most of those policies at the group level. So there's a very little or limited set of overrides that you need to do at a device level. So you can understand the degree of automation that you can drive using this system. Finally, in terms of monitoring, we map the full KPIs. You have the SD-WAN KPIs, the wired KPIs, the wireless LAN KPIs across your whole network, across all your sites. This really gives you that single pane of glass. Is there a problem in my wireless? Or is there a problem in my gateway which is causing issues, that is my AP is not able to connect, or my switch is not able to connect, right? So you start to correlate across these layers and start to display these KPIs. And if you have a problem in your site, you could drill down to a particular site. You can visualize the full topology. Now, assuming this is all Aruba, that is your AP switch as well as the gateway, you can visualize the end-to-end topology. Otherwise, if you have only some of the components, you can visualize those components. So depending on what you have, you can visualize. But you can visualize the underlay path, the VLANs, the ports, as well as the overlay path to all the head-end elements or to all the spokes that you're connected to. And you can see the state of how connectivity looks within your branch side. But you can also drill down at the same point all the way to a specific client or a specific session. And you can pin down and figure out where is that session going, what is the treatment it's getting in the network, what is the security profile of that session, and which WAN path is it taking, why is it taking that WAN path. So you can literally drill down and see that end-to-end state in the system. So this is the point Kishore was making. A traditional SD-WAN vendor would look at WAN connectivity, WAN path routes. We get it to the point where we're looking at clients and sessions and mapping all of that information at that granularity. So it's literally, I would say, 10x, not 2 or 3x, that kind of scale that we deal with. Question?
So I'll make it quick. Okay, we're doing lots of central, which is good. I mean, we're centralizing everything. How does, from central and SD-Branch, how is that tying back to, say, device insights, net, introspect, all of that stuff? Does that all, because it is all centralized and
it is.
central.
Actually, I had to move a little fast, but it will be covered in the security section for certain. But if you see, device insight is one of the services that is running within central. So the basic concept is once you are collecting all this telemetry
So it's already in central.
Exactly.
Okay.
So once you're collecting the telemetry into the system, right? You're getting all this state. You want to leverage all this state to drive profiling, to define analytics-based use cases. So that's the point that Partha was trying to make, that all of this then allows you to do proactive remediation rather than doing reactive.
Right. So it's still tying back, we're still pulling introspect and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
You're absolutely right.
So as long as we're talking about all these, we've got all these different components in Central, and Jim Palmer on Twitter was wanting to know if all these components are licensed separately, or if you just license Central, it's just all there.
No, it's licensed separately.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a little more nuanced, but at the highest level, you want to understand it's licensed separately. It's not a one flat license for everything. But, for example, each device has its own license. Like access point has its license, switch has a license, gateway has its license. And then there are certain services like device insight and so on and so forth, which are slightly different licensing structure based on the types of entities and the number of entities that they're recognizing. So slightly different structure, but it's not one doesn't fit all.
Right.
You have different licensing structures for each one.
Yeah, the pricing dimension for something like device insight is different than the pricing insight for SD-WAN or AP management, right? It's more number of client based rather than device based.
Yeah.
So I think one other thing, if it wasn't clear, is customer who looks at this does not have to deploy the entire SD-Branch solution. They could choose to deploy just the SD-WAN solution. They could keep their existing VLANs and ACL model as is. They could even choose to deploy just the SD-LAN component if they choose to. So, but typically we see most customers do the whole thing.
Yeah. And if you do the whole thing, then you can leverage the full power of the user-centric policies and role-centric policies, which you can use for your LAN side access or for your security policies in terms of who can talk to who within the network, or you can use it for your WAN side policies as well. For example, very simply, I can say all guest split tunnel traffic. I don't have to say match on VLAN, match on IP. I can write an access policy which says security personnel talk to security camera. No IPs, no VLANs, right? And pretty much all of it is mapped in the system, right? So I wanted you to get the concept that we're using context that we're deriving on the LAN side and applying it for security as well as for WAN, right? And you'll see that in the demonstrations which come up. Yeah, that's all I had. Any questions, final questions before?
On the KPIs, can you customize those to make sure that your ISP is providing what you expect?
Today, we've captured the base set of KPIs which we dashboard. A lot of it is accessible using APIs as well. And so if somebody wanted to build their own dashboards, their own alerting, the system allows you to generate specific alerts that they want to and get notified by webhooks, or we have Splunk integration and all that stuff. Splunk and all those event notification frameworks, PagerDuty and so on and so forth, integrated within Central.